Hey guys, Rick Taylor here with KS USA. Today we're going to talk about how to service your LEV and LEV DX seat post. So before we get started, let's talk about a couple tools that you're going to need. The first is going to be some soft jaws, and you'll want to have these so that you can clamp the post and work on it. The other thing you can use is a clamp on a bike stand. But if you're going to clamp it, what you want to do is use a scrap of an old inner tube and wrap around the post, then clamp it in your bike stand. Be sure not to over torque it. You don't want to bend or damage the mast, but that'll hold it in place and allow you to do the work on it. The other thing you're going to need is either an axle vise or a V-groove soft jaw. We've got one here that we use in the shop that's kind of a hand deal, but you can get one that'll actually fit into your vise and work really well. Bike shops can get those for you. Park and some other tool manufacturers make axle vices that work really well for that purpose. So the first step we're going to do is go ahead and clamp our seat post into the vise. And again, we want to be really careful when we tighten this down. We don't want to over torque it and damage it. Just get it tight enough so that it doesn't move or slip. First thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the end cap. And to do that, we'll want to use a strap wrench. Basically, they're designed to assemble or disassemble pipe plumbing, and it's a rubber strap so you don't do any damage to the surface. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and remove that end cap. Set the strap wrench aside. Unscrew that end cap. And we're going to go ahead and set this aside. And then there's an actuator here, and what you're going to do is push the actuator in. You're going to turn counterclockwise just a little bit, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the cable to unhook from the actuator arm here, and that's going to release. Once you've removed this, we can go ahead and push this out. It's really important that you don't push on the seat post or push this down while this end cap is apart. This is a very light, very intricate part, and if you put force on it by pushing down, you can do damage to this alloy part. So this is only to be hooked up with the actuator and used inside. You don't ever want to push on this to try to actuate the system when it's outside. It's not designed for that. So we'll go ahead and push this out. You see there's a bottom out bumper here which will move out of the way. Now if you've got a tool similar to this that you can clamp, you can do that this way. If you don't and you're using a soft jaw for your vise, then obviously we're going to take this portion out, we're going to clamp this in place, and then we'll use a wrench to remove this here. Okay, so it's a 16mm open end wrench. We're just going to turn that counterclockwise. The actuator is going to unscrew, and what's going to be here is the actuator assembly, the piston, and the push rod. So you can leave those kind of put together as an assembly. Just make sure you don't lose that little piston there. It's a small part and easy to lose. And go ahead and set that aside. Next, we want to take this bottom out bumper off and set it aside. Okay, now we're going to pull this just up out of the way. Now, if your seal collar is loose enough, you can loosen it by hand. You can go ahead and do that. If not, grab your strap wrench and loosen it that way. Before we go too far, I think it's a good idea, if there's any debris or dirt around the outside, just use a microfiber towel and wipe any debris away. We'll do that because that's going to prevent any additional dirt or grit from getting down inside the bearing and everything. Just makes our cleanup job a little easier. We'll go ahead and unscrew that. Okay, our next step is going to be to go ahead and pull lightly. And we're going to try to pull the DU bushing out. Now, if after a few pulls it's not popping out like this and you're still stuck, you want to be really careful, because inside here there's the DU surface of the bushing that's pressed into this carrier. If you're pulling on this and you see that start to move, stop. Don't pull any further. What you want to do is use a small screwdriver, catch the edge, just take a dead blow mallet and tap it and loosen that up. You don't want to pull on this and pull that bearing out, because there's these guide bushings inside that are pushing against that inner bushing, and you can do damage to that. So the next thing you want to do is Either hold these with your finger or put your hand underneath them to catch them as they slide out. Sometimes these lower guide bushings can fall out as you remove that. Okay, so once we remove that, we'll go ahead and just take a utility knife. And we're gonna take these 3 guide bushings off. And so the utility knife just kind of helps you catch the edge of them and pull them off. Next thing you want to check is your DU bushing. The DU bushing should slide easily, but it shouldn't have any up and down or side to side play. If you detect play there, it's a good idea to go ahead and replace the DU bushing now. You can get this through your local bike shop. If you're a bike shop, you can get this through your local distributor. In our case, it's in good shape. The inside surface is good, so we're just going to clean it and reuse it. Last thing we're going to do is take off the seal collar. We'll set the stanchion aside for now. Now with a microfiber rag and we're using some Simple Green here. You can basically just use any biodegradable degreaser. We're going to go ahead and clean this. Okay, now once we have this clean, we want to go ahead and inspect the seal surface inside. There should be a fairly sharp edge inside and outside. There's 2 wiper lips inside, and it should be a good clean edge. If there's any cracks or damage to this inside surface, then you're going to want to go ahead and replace that seal. Again, these are available through your local dealer, or for dealers through your local distributor. They're going to come out by hand. You can just use your fingernail to pop them out. The new one pops in, real easy to replace. But yeah, definitely check that. That's your first line of defense against contamination into the system, and so make sure that's in good shape. So we got that clean. Now we're going to take our DU bushing. We're going to wipe that clean. It's a good time now that we've got it out and clean to just check the surface inside that DU bushing. That's a Teflon based bushing surface. If you see any gouges or scratches, go ahead and replace it. If it looks good like ours does here, we'll go ahead and reuse it. Okay, lastly we're gonna go ahead and clean up our stanchion cartridge assembly. So just wipe that down. Make sure everything's clean. It's probably a good idea at this point to go ahead and pull off the lower cradle and clean that. Sometimes you get a little bit of dirt and debris down inside. So get this surface in here clean. Also get the surfaces where the bolts tighten up clean. That's going to help later on when you reassemble everything, so that you can make sure you get the correct torque. If you get dirt down in there, sometimes it'll affect and give you an incorrect torque reading. Okay, so now that that's clean, we'll go ahead and slide this back on, and it just fits right back up to the top. Go ahead and lube our seal now. So we're using KS post paste. You can get that from your local dealer. Dealers get it through your distributor. If you can't find post paste, you can also use Slick Honey, which is really good. It's a suspension specific lube. It's a very light body, but it's very clingy, and so it stays in place really well. I would recommend not using some of the heavier greases. Really try to find either the post paste or the Slick Honey. It just works the best. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and lube our wiper seal, and we're going to go ahead and pack some grease in. Just kind of pushing it in and smearing it along, and what it's doing is there's a cavity between the 2 seals, and we're filling that with grease. Okay, so once that's filled, we're going to go ahead and put that on the stanchion. The reason we're filling that up, one, it pre-lubes the stanchion, so it makes it really smooth and not sticky when that seal slides. The other thing it does is it prevents any water from entering in there. It creates a really good water barrier. So if you're riding in wet conditions, it's really important to make sure you follow this step. Next thing we'll do is go ahead and put the DU bushing on. Again, it's greased up, it's sliding good, there's no play, so we're good there. Next we're going to go ahead and put on the guide bushings. What you want to do is put a little bit of grease in that groove, set it in, kind of push it in, and then put a little bit more lube on it. By doing that, what we're doing is kind of creates a little bit of suction between the grease and those bushings, and it helps. It's like an extra set of hands. It just holds them in place. And then by putting the grease on top, the raceways will be properly lubed. Everything will be real smooth when we put it back together. Last, we'll go ahead and put that bottom out bumper back in place. Now we can set that assembly aside. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and work on the mast shaft, so we're going to take this out of the vise. Set the clamps aside. Now, using a flat blade screwdriver, you can get a hold of the coupler here and pull that out till it stops. This one's pretty clean because it's a pretty new post. A lot of them, if they haven't been serviced for a while, this is going to be kind of a gray color. And what you're going to want to do is get that as clean as you possibly can. So we'll go ahead and just use a microfiber towel and get that clean. Next thing we're going to do is inside here there's a roller that this cable slides over. You want to make sure as you move the cable back and forth that that roller is moving freely. If the roller doesn't seem to be moving freely, or there's a lot of gunk built up inside, then it would be a good idea to go ahead and take that wheel out. What you want to do is put your finger inside the mast so you catch it so it doesn't fall out. Go ahead and take the pivot pin out. Okay, take the wheel out, wipe everything down, and you're just going to put it back up inside. I'm going to put a little bit of lube on that pivot pin. I'm going to have to wiggle a little bit to get it started. It's got a tapered end, so it'll eventually find its way into the center of the pulley. And tighten it down. You get it hand tight, go a quarter turn past hand tight, and we're just going to go ahead and feed this down. And the weight of that coupler is going to make the cable drop down in. Once you can see it at the bottom, pull it in. Now what's important, we want to make sure that that barrel lines up in there and is flat inside. If it's twisted or cockeyed, it's going to hang up and give you problems later. What I generally will do is I'll go ahead and pull that cable back. Inside there's a raceway that it sits in. If you pull it back and hold it with your thumb, that'll keep it in place. We're going to go ahead and take our microfiber towel and we're going to clean this out. And you can kind of see the dirty grease coming out of it now. And if you just keep rubbing this, you'll eventually get all of the dirt and debris out of the bearing, so it's good and clean. What you'll see is some shine will come back to those brass bushings, or brass rollers rather, inside, and you'll see the clean white color of the inner raceway. Once that's all clean, then you're in good shape. You can stop. You've got a long screwdriver. You can put that microfiber towel, wrap it around the end of the screwdriver. Go ahead and push that in. Again, hold this cable in place. Push that in. You'll see it start to come out the end there, and then go ahead and pull it back out. And all those fibers are going to get inside and they're going to clean out all the raceways. So when you look down inside, you want to make sure that inside there it all looks clean and shiny all the way through. If you've got any debris left and you can't get it out with a microfiber towel, maybe take a flat blade screwdriver, something that fits in those raceways, and just kind of scrape them, and you'll scrub them. You don't want to push really hard and gouge it, but just take off any surface grit or debris and then get back inside there and clean it out. So once we've got it all clean and we know that's good, we're going to take some slick honey. We're going to push that down in, and what we're doing is we're forcing the grease down into the bearing. It's going to go around the roller and squirt back out the other side of the race, and that's what we're looking for. We want to make sure we get that completely filled with the grease. That's important for that bearing to function properly. It also, if you're riding in wet conditions, the grease really helps prevent corrosion and problems with sticking between maintenances. Okay, so we'll get that all lubed up. Generally, I like to take a little dollop and just push it in, that wheel that we cleaned earlier. I like to push it in there and it'll squirt out just a little bit in the front there. That puts a little bit of extra lube on the cable. So if you look at the mast here, we have these 3 copper guide bushings at the bottom. And if you look inside that bearing, we have 3 little spots where they're going to ride. What I like to do is I like to line them up just to the right of where they line up, and go ahead and slide the cartridge in till it stops. Hold these with your 3 fingers so that they don't pop out. And now if you turn counterclockwise, it'll just drop in as soon as it gets to those. Slide it in until they get basically all the way lined up, and then you can let go with your fingers. You want to make sure you hold them in because you don't want those things going in cockeyed and being damaged or bent. And then we talked earlier about pulling that cable down. So the inner cable, I like to pull it down out of the way. It's important that the cable rides inside the raceway. If it doesn't and you jam this in, you're going to damage that cable. So take your time, slide it in. If you feel resistance, stop, pull it back out and see what's going on in there. Don't force it because you're going to damage something. Okay, now we'll go ahead and thread this in. Okay, now we're going to want to clean any grease off the outside of this. Tighten it hand tight. Okay, then we're going to use our strap wrench again. And you want to go about a quarter turn past hand tight. And that's all you need. That's going to hold that bushing in place. Now, like we talked about, that bottom mount bumper is already in place. We're going to take that cable. We're going to line it up there. Like I said, there's a raceway inside that's going to line up with. So we're going to just pull that back out of the way. Our next step is going to be to go ahead and put that push rod back in. And we're going to put a little bit of the slick honey grease on that. And go ahead and slide that in. Now take note, there's a long and a short side. The short side needs to go in. The long side is where that piston is going to go. So put that in. Make sure there's no grit or anything on this. If there is, use your microfiber towel and wipe it. I'm going to go ahead and put this on. Then we're going to take a dollop of grease and put on the tip of that. Again, you're going to want to make sure this is clean. In this case, it's in good shape. It doesn't have any corrosion or anything. Okay, you want to check here, make sure that there's no gouging. If it's properly lubricated, that'll still be smooth and look good. You want to check the function of this wheel here. You want to make sure that's smooth. If it's not, there's the same pivot there, and you'll take that out and grease it just like we did in the top one. In our case, this is in really good shape, so we don't need to do that. We're going to go ahead and thread this on to hand tight. In our case, we're using this hand-held clamp. If you're using the axle vise, you'll take this out and clamp it here. Again, being really careful. Tighten it down. Take our 16mm wrench. Now it's hand tight. We're going to go 1/8 of a turn past hand tight and stop. You don't want to over torque this. It's a hollow alloy part, and if you over torque it, you can snap that off and you'll have to replace the whole cartridge. So be really careful. Maximum 1/8 of a turn over hand tight on this. Okay, this next part's kind of important. You want to make sure with this in the raceway, pull it back with your hand. Now you're going to take and rotate the actuator by hand. You want the pulley to line up with your inner cable here. Go ahead and push it in. And what you want to avoid, if this is clocked that way, you're going to either damage that or the cable's going to cross and it's going to get jammed up inside. It's possible to push it in out of alignment. So you really need to pay attention to this when you're doing it. And when you push it in, make sure that it locks in. There's a detent where it's going to lock, but you need to make sure that that cable lines up perfectly with this pulley. Next thing you're going to do is pull the actuator down. And again, we talked about rotating this coupler until the cable itself clears the end of the actuator. Slowly let it sit back out. Now we're going to want to make sure that the cable right here is seated inside the pulley. So there's a little groove like this in the pulley, and you want that cable to sit inside of it. So it's going to go right inside here and line up. Now that we've got everything seated in, our last step is to put the end cap on. Check the inside of your end cap. Sometimes if you've hosed the bike down or been riding in wet conditions and you got water in, gravity's going to bring the water down and it's going to sit in here. You don't want to put a dirty cap back on. Make sure you clean that out good. Okay, so we'll go ahead and thread this cap on. You want to be careful and make sure you don't cross thread it. They are aluminum threads and it's a fine thread pitch, so if you cross thread it, you can damage them. So just take care when you thread it on. We're going to go ahead and thread this down to hand tight. Take the rag and wipe it down one more time, make sure there's no grease on that. Then we're going to take our strap wrench and we're going to tighten a quarter turn past hand tight. Okay, so now our post is ready to install on the bike.